back in 2009, I took a stab at Bamboo Blade. I was young, stupid, barely knew what I was doing, and frankly, the less we talk about my old videos, the better. However, I feel that in this current climate of male-dominated sports shows, it's worth taking a look at this little gem. So the show makes no bones about the fact that kendo is not exactly a female-dominated sport, and that makes it kinda cool and weird in its own way. It also makes it seem a whole lot cooler when we get to see their high-powered fighting. Bamboo Blade is a show that really should not be missed. It started life as a manga, which will come into play later, and began in 2004. It ran until 2010, got 2 spin-offs, one of which is actually still running, called Bamboo Blade B and C, respectively. No one called it original, they just called it fun. The main conceit is that Toraji, a down-on-his-luck teacher and kendo instructor, has to drag together a crop of kendo-ettes to win a bet against his senpai, who is also a kendo instructor. Very limited job prospects of a team. Kind of like being a history teacher in an American high school, you're there because you're coaching a sport. Of course, in our modern era, going to a kendo club when you can just go home and eat chips instead seems like a bad call, so he's got precisely 3 members of the club. 2 bullies who never show up, and Kirino Chiba, a blonde girl with peculiar notions and a crippling case of cat mouth. Friends, cat mouth is no laughing matter. It may not seem like much at first, but it could be a sign of early moeitis. This crippling disease affects thousands of anime characters a year, and without your help there may never be a cure. Tell your friends, and please, consider donating to the No More Moe Foundation. Together, we can find a cure. Wait, what was I talking about? Oh right, Kirino. I don't like to cast aspersions, but man, I think she's taken one too many blows to the head over the course of her kendo career. But you need 5 full members to be a competitive kendo team, so Toraji is kind of in a crunch. Also, he's kind of a piece of shit, but more on that later. During their welcome week, we get a few more prospects into the club, but they lack certain things that are necessary for this team. Namely, ovaries.
No! No boys allowed!
Why waste your time observing when you can join the club and start kicking butt?
But what Acorn Boy brings to the table is one Miyako Miyazaki, a girl who is clearly so out of his league that either they share some sort of weird fetish or he eats pussy like he eats cake. So Yuji, Dan, and Miya all get shanghaied into the club, primarily because there's not a ping pong club at their school. It's just as well, as short as Dan is, I doubt the stunty little git could actually sit over the table. Yuji also happens to know a pretty good kendoka who goes to their school, but she hasn't popped up yet. And it is here that we meet the killer ace of the club, Tamaki Kawazoe, Tama-chan to her friends. Considering that her typical evening consists of beating the ever-loving hell out of folks twice her size and then going and watching anime like she's getting paid for it, it's no shock that she doesn't want to go to the club. But try as she might, her sense of justice is too well developed, and when the 2 bullies who are still in said club go and start some shit, the taciturn little lady has to go and clean house. Here's where the majority of the show is centered. Technique. Mangaka Masahiro Totsuka knows what kendo is all about, and Aguri Igarashi's art can accurately portray the action shown. Translated into anime, it provides well-paced action and shows precisely what needs to be shown to make the competition feel authentic, without resorting to Dempsey rolls, flaming basketballs, and disappearing point guards. The motions look authentic to the sport they're playing, and this actually goes a long way to make the show visually engaging. So here's something to keep in mind about kendo. They're basically fighting with baseball bats, and they are swinging for the fucking fences. And especially with Tamaki, she could probably take someone's head off their shoulders or shatter their ribs if she wasn't so genteel. Point being, you don't have to make kendo more action-packed. So without the need for whoop-de-doo special techniques, it focuses on the core of the competition. So once Tamaki goes ham on these boys and whips them into shape, that's when we get to see just what Miya has behind those big Bambi eyes of hers. Not only is she a nasty piece of work, but she actually seems to enjoy bashing people with a stick. But when she decides to nab some street justice, she ends up running into the next member of our little crew, Sayako Kuwahara, who, incidentally, is also out of her damn mind. She's got a lot of creative energy, but lacks things like talent and stick-to-itiveness, since she tends to run off at a moment's notice. She and Kirino have known each other for years, so nothing Saya does seems to faze her, even the threat of her own impending demise. She's got the stature for kendo as well, though she thinks of it less of a blessing and more of a hindrance. Saya and Miya get off on the wrong foot, but smooth it out with a little nudging from Sensei. With 4 members, they still can't have their practice match, but that certainly doesn't stop Toraji from trying anyway. Tamaki has a rather uncompromising nature when it comes to matters of justice, but she's also swayed by things like collector's items. Woman after my own heart, really. So when it comes time to go and raise a little hell, she has to take 2 slots up in the list. The ruse they concoct to make it work, it fools no one. She blows through all the opponents, even the strongest fighter on the opposite team, to the point that Kenzaburo, the coach of the other team, wants to fight her. By all rights, she should get creamed because he's an accomplished kendoka and twice her size, but clearly she ate her Wheaties that morning. Also, yeah, that's from my opening sequence. From there, the realization that whatever merits Toraji may have as a kendo instructor are far outweighed by his almost Lupin-esque personality, because nothing seems particularly beneath him, and using people seems to be part of the job. I am not, as you say, a fan of his, and while I'm certain that there's some kind of redemption available for him, I don't particularly know if I'm invested in him as a character to see it through. The girls, on the other hand, are far more interesting, and their stories play out in a fun way. Tamaki watches too much Super Sentai, and she has an overdeveloped sense of justice. Miya is a gangster on the men, kind of like Miyu in Super Gals. Kirino is, well, she's just Kirino, and she plays off of Saya very well. Also, ship it. The final character is kind of an afterthought in the anime, unfortunately. Satori Azuma is a strong kendoka, but she's also the least developed. But because of her appearance, the team can actually go to tournaments and get into all that business that most sports shows do. And surprisingly, Muro High, our team of rejects and misfits, is actually pretty damn good at their sport. But that'll only take them so far. Unfortunately, the anime only goes so far as well. Since the show aired in 2007 and the series didn't get another season, I don't hold high hopes for another one coming up out of thin air. And as usual, given that I'm recommending it, I'm actually keeping my mouth shut about story things. But given that they also get hung up on a read the manga ending, fair warning to you should you go and watch said show. I feel like this show deserved to go as long as Kuroko no Basket or Haikyuu, because the characters, as cringeable as they may get, have more than enough mileage in them to go the full distance. Even as reprehensible as I find Toraji, there yet may be some redemption there, but I would rather watch it than read it. You know what's really cool, apropos of nothing? Body diversity. Especially in shows where there are a lot of girls, it's easy to just sort of line them up and head swap them. Except for the one with the big boobs and the one with no boobs. Here, physicality plays into both the character's identity and how they do at kendo. Tamaki has a very black and white sense of things, a sort of childish perspective belying great power. Yikes! This is reflected in her somewhat childish frame, short and very lithe, very much still a child. Miyako is an average high school girl who goes between big googly eyes and evil glares like most people go through socks. This hinders her both in life and in kendo because she's afraid of Dan seeing what's under the hood, and when that dark side comes out, it's poorly controlled both on stage and off. Saya and Kirino are more grown-up looking and are something more of teen moms, and it shows when Kirino has to take on more responsibility for her family as well. Long story short, representation matters. The English dub is pretty okay, featuring something of a who's who of veteran voice actresses from Funimation. You know, it's beginning to feel like bad dubbing is something of a fleeting memory. Of course, there are ups and downs, but truly atrocious translations and wooden acting is mostly fallen by the wayside by this point, and thank goodness for it. The show has this weird ethereal sort of feeling to it. It's good, and everyone I talk to who's seen it generally thinks so as well, but for some reason it just doesn't grab people in the way that it should. The art is there, the writing is there, the acting is there, all of the pieces come together in a good gel, and in spite of its lack of a satisfying ending, this show should be doing gangbusters in this sports anime-friendly climate. And yet it seems to have missed that sweet spot by about 10 years. I suppose it is worth noting that kendo is very quote-unquote Japanese, and it's not exactly what I would call entirely accessible, but it's not so dense as to lose people either. It's not Akagi, for crying out loud. At this point, I suppose a show that's 10 years old is still old anime, though, which, as someone who deals in anime older than he is, kind of makes me hurt on a, spiritual soul level. When it comes down to it, if you guys have any interest at all, you should definitely check out Bamboo Blade in any of its iterations. The manga and the anime are both well worth the time, and it really deserves more attention. It's also worth noting that it's not chock full of fan service like other shows that come out in this vein, like certain other sports shows I can think of. It definitely has its audience in mind, and considering that it's readily available across all of Funimation's boards, there's never been a better time to check it out. So while I'm too much of a coward to actually play kendo, I can live a little bit vicariously through this show, just like I do with Kuroko no Basketball and Haikyuu and that sumo wrestling show, Tiger